The 4400 is the fictional account of ordinary people who've had a portion of their lives stolen without explanation. This phenomenon, known as missing time, is not merely a Hollywood invention. In truth, far more than 4,400 people have reported this temporary hijacking of their lives.
It takes place through Western Europe, through Latin America, through Asia, through Africa. There is no place that we have looked at yet that does not have abduction reports.
Most identify these experiences as alien contact.
Researching the pathology books, no such entity has ever been found in the human body.
But researchers, ufologists, academics and scientists all have their own theories to explain why these extraordinary accounts exist.
We are constantly making decisions between things that happen out there in the objective world, in real life, and things that are only happening up here.
In the last 10 years, theories have been developed where we need other dimensions to explain the way the universe looks to us.
The missing time phenomenon is real.
This is not some kind of thing that happens in the dead of night to just one person.
These are the stories of the real 4400. Of all the reported abduction accounts, there is one case that has created more hype, speculation and controversy than any other. Travis Walton became one of the real 4400 in 1975, when he vanished without a trace for 5 days. As a result, he has been under constant scrutiny for the past 30 years.
I don't know which is worse, that I'm crazy and strange or that just a liar.
Travis claims he was abducted by a spaceship, which he and 6 of his workmates all saw while working for a logging firm in the Arizona National Forest, USA.
7 woodcutters said they were riding in this truck along an isolated mountain road when suddenly a spaceship hovered over them.
This was not some little point of light off in the sky. This was a metallic disc right there, outlined against the sky, totally unmistakable.
22-year-old Travis Walton reportedly got out of the truck and approached the spaceship. Walton was then struck down by a bluish flash of light.
I just felt this shock go through my body. It was just kind of like an electrical shock, but I blacked out just instantly.
Frightened, his companions drove away. When they returned a short time later, Walton was gone.
Travis's initial disappearance sparked a murder investigation, but the men's UFO stories combined with Travis's eventual return created an even bigger story that the media lapped up.
Did they communicate to you, or did you try to communicate with them?
Well, I tried to communicate it with them, but there was no answer. They never talked to me or anything.
The media circus was just incredible in town, just like things you see in the movies or something,
Just doesn't sound like a true tale to me.
I do think he had an experience of some kind.
Reporters stomping through the flower beds, looking through the windows, ambushing people when they come out of their houses, that sort of thing.
I've always thought there could be UFOs, but that story's kind of far-fetched.
Seeing's believing, and I haven't seen it.
You've seen them?
Yeah.
Around here?
We've seen from 3 to 7 in the sky at night.
They accused me of ducking the media. And then when I finally gave interviews, I'm accused of being a publicity seeker. So I couldn't win,
The story turned Travis into the first alien abductee celebrity and ultimately earned him huge notoriety plus a book and a Hollywood movie deal.
A lot of people think the motivation is attention-seeking or financial, but I'd have to say overall, movie and book included, the net effect has been negative in a financial sense and certainly in a quality of life sense. I don't want to be the bug in the jar anymore, I don't want that kind of scrutiny. I'd like to just get on with my life and if something like that was to happen again, I wouldn't say anything to anybody.
Travis's experience is a clear example of the stigma attached to this subject. While the media enjoy ridiculing these accounts, a growing number of academics and scientists believe these reports require serious investigation.
These kind of reports of alien abduction and alien contact have been made for decades now. And it's only relatively recently that people have tried to explain what might be going on. And what we, I think, can quite safely say from recent research is that whatever is going on, these people are not just making it up, they're not just lying, they are sincere in their claims.
Chris French is Europe's leading psychologist studying the alien abduction phenomenon and has just published a paper exploring the contact experience.
Now, either people really are being abducted by aliens, or alternatively, it's a very, very interesting psychological phenomenon, and we can learn a lot about human psychology by taking it seriously and studying it.
The first reported abduction case occurred in 1961 in the White Mountains, USA, and was followed by countless claims across the states.
And just as we started down the woods, well, it went up through the trees. It looked like a big cigar shape with light lit from both ends.
It looked to me like a flying saucer.
With so many accounts coming from just one country, it was initially believed that this was a cultural phenomenon and so couldn't be real.
The reason that we hear more about it here in the United States is because we have an organization and a group of people who are willing to take this seriously so that there's someone to whom a person can report their experiences.
Bud Hopkins started researching this subject in the 70s and is considered by many to be the founder and godfather of this movement.
I've worked with between 500 and 600 people, a prominent NASA engineer, physicists. I still receive probably 3 potential cases that deserve investigation every week. This is not some kind of thing that happens in the dead of night to just one person.
But it's not just America where these accounts have been reported and investigated. The British government first set up the Flying Saucer Working Party in 1950 by the then scientific advisor, Sir Henry Tizard. And the MOD has maintained an interest in this area ever since.
Between 1991 and 1994, I ran the British government's UFO project at the Ministry of Defence. That's how I became involved in UFO research, and through that, I got involved in looking at the whole alien abduction mystery. I've looked, I guess, at about 100 cases of people who claim to have been abducted by aliens. They're not mad, they're for real. Something absolutely bizarre has happened to these people, I've got no doubt about it.
It's only as serious research has been made public that many abductees have had the courage to come forward.
I opened up a book called Encounters by Dr. Edith Fiore, and in the back of the book was a listing of therapists and psychologists who work with people who had had my experience.
Michael Carter, a hospital chaplain, had what is known as the classic abduction experience in 1994 while at home in bed.
I got up and I looked up and there was a being sitting on the edge of my bed, just staring at me. And my room was lit up. It was lit up like it was daytime. I pulled the covers over my head and hoped it would go away. When I did that, I heard this like a whirlwind in my ear and the temperature changed. That was the first encounter. Even to this day, I'm afraid to go to bed with the lights out.
With the majority of reported abduction cases occurring between the hours of 10 p.m. and 8 a.m., most skeptics argue that a common sleep disorder called sleep paralysis may be at the root of these experiences.
Sleep certainly isn't simple. There are a lot of different stages. It's a complex process. There are lots of chemicals involved, a lot of physiology involved, and lots of things can go wrong with it.
Dr. Chris Ijikowski is director of the British Sleep Assessment and Advisory Service. He has combined his research of sleep with studies into fear and anxiety.
Sleep paralysis is when you wake up out of sleep and find that you can't move. For some people, breathing might be impaired. You start to get this amazing sense of that you're dying. You're frightened partly because you've come out of rapid eye movement sleep, so the physiology is out of control. Heart rate, breathing, everything like that is out of control. Your sensory systems haven't switched on properly yet, so there's all kinds of hallucinatory activity. So you can end up with visual hallucinations. You can end up with auditory hallucinations, odd sounds and things. Everybody will experience it at least once in a lifetime. If you experience it a couple of times, then you may start to wonder what's going on. If you experience it more than that, then you really get to worry.
Now, If you had some kind of an experience like that, you might hear voices or footsteps or mechanical noises. You might see lights moving around the room. You may then come across ufologists who tell you, well, actually, you've probably been abducted by aliens and they've wiped your memory for the rest of this.
For sleep paralysis, which is now the explanation du jour, it's the current one, they've had to stretch the meaning to things like micro-sleep, where being asleep is defined as being awake.
Professor David Jacobs is director of the International Center for Abduction Research. He's a leading academic who's been researching the UFO and alien abduction mystery for over 30 years.
Of the 900 cases that I have looked at, more than half, or as many as half, take place when a person is not asleep.
Skeptics use sleep paralysis to explain the majority of classic abduction accounts. But it does little to make sense of reports that take place when individuals are awake or when they involve groups of people being taken together.
I was aware of feeling so relaxed, like I couldn't move, but I wasn't really bothered that I couldn't move.
You'd be happy just to sit there and look at it forever, or just want it to land and go away with it.
Rachel Devereaux is a 35-year-old shop manager from Lancaster, England, who had her first missing time experience only 3 months ago. What makes her account exceptional is that it was shared by her mother Anne and her 2 sons Alexandra and Benjamin.
We've been to the Little Chef and we just had our tea there, an evening meal. We left there about 5:30. I remember looking at the clock, so I was thinking it was about 20 past 5:30 because I thought I've got my ironing to do, I need to get home.
Benjamin was in the furthest corner of the car and my nana was in just behind me.
The boys were chatting and we remember commenting on the chimneys. The silhouette of the chimneys really stood out against the sky. When I think about it, that's the last thing I can remember. The next thing I remember is just seeing this awesome bright light.
I saw it going up and then it hovered right above the car.
It doesn't make sense even, when I talk about it, but we all felt that it was like just this absolutely overwhelming love that you just felt from it.
You'd be happy just to sit there and look at it forever, or just want it to land and go away with it. Yeah. And leave everything else behind. It was hovering for a bit and came in front of the car and hovered, then all of a sudden it shot off.
Then it was like, all of a sudden, and then I was driving and the noise was back.
You felt this feeling of loss when it had gone, because you wanted that feeling that it gave you. You wanted it back again. Going from the Little Chef to our house should have taken about 20 minutes, and it's taken us an hour and 20 minutes.
There's facts that I've gone over and over and over in my head and tried to rationalise and tried to fit into what we know as the world today and everything, and it just doesn't fit.
While each abduction account has its own peculiarities, psychologists believe the way in which we process memories could play an important role in understanding these incredible reports.
We are constantly making decisions between things that happen out there in the objective world, in real life, and things that are only happening up here. A lot of what we take to be genuine memories, often the whole thing is completely fabricated and false, but it feels just the same as a real memory. An everyday example would be, did you lock the back door, or did you just think about locking the back door? And it's frighteningly easy to implant false memories in a sizable minority of the population. For example, if you show people a photograph which has actually been computer generated of them from their childhood going on a balloon ride, and this photograph is in with lots of photographs from things in their childhood which really did take place, a sizable minority will actually quite happily tell you about the time they went up in a hot air balloon when they were 6, even though that event never actually took place. We do know that we're all potentially prone to these false memories, much more so than we would ever have once guessed.
False memory syndrome is based on the idea that memory is faulty. And memory is faulty. Obviously, I'm living proof that memory is faulty the older I get. The fact is, though, that memory is not so faulty that people are going to forget entire events. They might get details wrong. They might get their chronology out of order a little bit. But the fact that they were, for example, in a train crash or something like that, they're not going to forget that event. Without anecdotal evidence, without human memory, without the ability to retrieve memories, we would not have a judicial system and a civilization would grind to a halt.
Psychologists have developed a wide range of plausible theories to explain why individuals believe they've been abducted by aliens. But all of them have ultimately been countered by ufologists.
It has ranged from simply lying to psychosis, it's mass hallucination, it's mass hysteria. It goes on and on and on. There is no end to it.
However, skeptics believe there is one simple factor that makes their case watertight.
As a scientist, I'm interested in the question of whether or not there is anything happening here in terms of objective reality. If there's no way of us being able to produce any kind of evidence, hard physical evidence, then I'd say that what we're looking at is essentially a psychological phenomenon.
In order to really challenge the skeptic's argument, ufologists need to find evidence that can stand up to scientific scrutiny. In France, one of the real 4400 believe they may hold the proof ufologists have been looking for.
Je me considère absolument rationnel, à la fois dans les activités et dans les pensées que j'ai.
Eric Julien is a retired pilot and air traffic controller whose career involved making tough decisions while under immense pressure.
Pour exercer le métier qui demande une stabilité psychologique extrêmement importante, tant pour être pilote que pour être contrôleur aérien.
Over the past 15 years, Eric claims to have had a variety of extraterrestrial experiences, both at home and at work.
C'est également le contact radar d'un target sur mon scope radar lorsque j'étais contrôleur aérien dans l'armée de l'air, qui allait de l'est vers l'ouest à 28 000 km/h.
As well as sightings, Eric claims to have had regular contact and communication with alien beings that have given him a clear understanding of their technology.
C'est que nos outils scientifiques de preuve sont limités à l'espace matériel de la réalité. Et c'est toute la difficulté que nous avons à comprendre le comportement des extraterrestres précisément.
After enduring years of abduction experiences, Eric believes he has recently been left with solid evidence of their visits.
Un élément de preuve qui peut être apporté donc à la science, c'est l'apparition soudaine en l'espace de ces hêtes, pourrait être un implant qui a été posé par des extraterrestres au cours d'une nuit.
Eric's lump provides science with something tangible it can test. But Bud Hopkins believes his 30 years of research has already unearthed all the evidence that anyone would need.
The skeptics are fond of saying there's no physical evidence. What the skeptics are saying, gee, I haven't heard of any because I haven't looked into it. Okay, these are some of the photographs of scoop marks that turn up again and again. I may have seen 100 of these. Why don't the critics recognize it? It's because they don't even know anything about it.
Bud has collected photographs of abductees who claim their experience left them with abnormal scars.
This is on a man's back. Here's another one on the front of the shin. This is one on a little boy that turned up overnight. He was 5 years old. I had one case where there were 3 young women involved in an abduction experience. And at the end of it, each one had a scoop mark in exactly the same place. The doctors who have looked at these things have told me that they most closely resemble the scars from punch biopsies. Sometimes they will take 2 samples. The person is re-abducted and another sample is taken. Sometimes people remember the tool that was used. One can infer without much difficulty that they're taking a flesh sample to take from us our own DNA, our own physical genetic makeup. Again, these are marks which turn up again and again, but we have no explanation of exactly why they are taking this flesh, except obviously they're getting some kind of sample.
Eric has come to London to visit a leading ear, nose and throat specialist and have the lump behind his ear tested.
Hello. Hello, this is Eric Julien to see Dr. Patel, please.
Come on in.
He's hoping the results will make sense of his belief that the lump is in fact an alien implant.
C'est peut-être une découverte étonnante et qui pourra intéresser beaucoup de gens.
Glad to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Okay, let's take a look at this limb. It's not tender at all if I was to touch it like this, not causing any pain or discomfort.
No. Et que ce qui est le plus étrange dans cet implant, c'est qu'il bouge tout seul. Il a bougé de 12 mm en 6 mois.
Just turn your head slightly away from me.
Et je ne connais pas de corps organique dans le corps humain qui puisse faire ce type d'exploit.
This could be easy to diagnose further by doing a couple of tests. And I propose that we do an ultrasound of this area and a plain X-ray, and that should give us a lot more information.
One of the reasons why Eric believes his lump is an implant is due to the nature of his experiences that took place in the summer of 2003.
Hello, Mr. Julian. Alice McLean, I'm the radiologist.
Parmi les expériences que j'ai connues, il y avait des expériences médicales.
You've got a lump or a problem behind your ear, I understand.
Yes,
okay.
back here.
J'étais donc souvent allongé sur une espèce de lit dans une salle qui ressemblait à celle d'un dentiste, et j'ai plusieurs fois connu des expériences de sondes au-dessus du crâne et dessus sur le front.
All right, that's probably all we need.
Once the ultrasound and X-ray results are processed and evaluated,
Eric Julian, post-auricular ultrasound.
the consultant will be able to provide Eric with a clear diagnosis of his lump. Experience. Rachel, Anne and the boys were left confused by what it was they experienced.
The next day, we talked about it again, and you just wanted to know who else had seen it, but you just didn't know how to find that out. And you know, we talked about a number of things, and Mum came up with the idea of phoning the radio station, the local radio station.
A family from North Lancashire have been describing how they saw a mysterious light in the sky last night. Rachel Devereux was driving on the moors between Ingleton and Bentham with her 2 children and her mother, Anne. They all saw a bright light move at great speed and change directions. Anne says she's never seen anything like it before.
This was like a really, really bright, pure white light in a perfect ball shape. No trails, nothing.
Lots of people say, well, a few people have said they see this light seriously. Keith near Clitheroe, Vera in Clitheroe, and Ian in Fenny-Scolls.
A local UFO group also heard the family's story and made contact.
I got in touch with Anne first. I phoned her up, and that was shortly after they first saw the light. And she was very euphoric about it. She was just wanting to know what it was, really.
The UFO group were able to help Rachel and Anne document the events of the night, but the emotional support they could offer was limited.
We're a local UFO group. We're not professionally qualified at all. And I think it would be quite difficult for someone to go to their MP, the GP. There isn't anyone who can deal with people who've got a strange experience like this. I think they will want to get answers to what happened to them during that time. Whether they will do is open to question.
You've got all these different factors in your life that are just a complete mystery.
It's helplessness. And it makes you cry. Because you don't know how to stop it. You don't know what it was. It's making me cry now. I don't know why. I don't know why I'm crying. If you start to think about it like we are now, it becomes overwhelming. And you can't cope with it. They can mock you, the skeptics can say, oh, you've all got false memories and you all imagined it. But I know I didn't, because I know how it's made me feel inside.
More than anything, it's just wanting to make sense of it. That's the feeling it gives you. Just wanting more knowledge and wanting to make everything fit into place in a way that you can understand.
While these experiences often create feelings of fear and anxiety, not everyone who reports them find them distressing. In fact, many believe their contact with extraterrestrial beings has ultimately enriched their lives.
My first really conscious memory of my experiences with extraterrestrials was from about the age of 3 years old, where I would be meeting, I guess, like my other family. They were no different to me. I just saw them as my star family, like, you know, and my parents here were my Earth family.
Tracy Taylor grew up in Perth, Western Australia, and claims to have had regular experiences that involved tests on her body and information put into her mind.
I think I learned pretty quick not to talk about it. I think I just focused it into my schoolwork and used the knowledge and the understandings that I had to do well at school.
Tracy's experiences intensified through her teens until she got to the point where she felt she needed to take control of what was going on.
I had to question my own sanity, basically. So I went along to visit psychiatrists, psychologists, asked for my brain to be scanned. I'm ready to think, they're going to take me off to the hospital in a minute. The brain scans showed up to be normal, all the psychological tests showed up to be fine. One of them walked up to me and said, is there anything really negative about this? And I said, well, not really, but it's hard to integrate into my life. And he said, well, good luck with it. I was just, what? Okay, this is confirmation for me, all right. And that was the end of it. I just walked out of there and thought, okay, I'll get on with it. I'll accept it.
Tracy now integrates her experiences into the rest of her life and focuses on the positive aspects they've brought her.
Also just prints.
Fantastic. There's a lot of symbolism here.
Yes.
She believes her contact with extraterrestrials has given her a unique artistic ability that she now wants to develop into a career.
The first time I ever did one of these drawings, I just had the urge to get my paper and my pen. Something just sort of came over me and my hand started to move.
Do you actually see anything, or is it just from within you?
Like a downloading of information, I suppose, in a symbolic form. It just sort of seems to feel like it comes through me, it's not from me.
Much more like a sort of radio wave.
Yeah, so It's
Tracy was interested in art before these illustrations came through, but claims that her style of drawing changed radically overnight.
I mean, this I recognise very much a sort of Aztec type of symbol.
Over a period of time, I spoke to people who study ancient cultures, and these people were able to pinpoint things in the pictures, saying this is something that you could find in a temple in Peru, and this is something you'd find in a temple in Luxor in Egypt.
And can an expert read this?
I've had linguists looking at it, and they say again that it's related to hieroglyphics in ancient Sumerian.
At various times over the past 6 years, Tracy has also produced a series of graphical illustrations, which she claims she later discovered hold a hidden message.
And that circle's dropping over the top of that pyramid.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, and yet again it fits. So these were all done over different periods of time, and yet they all lock together
Yes.
to form a whole. Looking at it just on a purely surface level, there is an element of storytelling.
Apparently this depicts the past and moving into the present and then moving into the future.
And that element of storytelling I can relate to because they have a similarity to stained glass windows and telling a spiritual story.
And the lotus blossoms.
And that bursting forth. Yeah. We probably we never know the answer of where it comes from and how it gets to be in a pencil at the tip of her hand. But you can't take away from the fact that there is something there.
It's common for abductees to claim to be given special abilities as a result of their experience. Typically, these will include the ability to heal or to be able to pass on messages to humanity.
If in some way the messages that are coming through me can assist other people and the planet that they're connected to, I think it's great.
One of the things that has to always be borne in mind about the abduction experience is that the communication in virtually all these cases is telepathic. So one has to assume that every abductee can pick up thoughts from the aliens and communicate non-verbally. Therefore, that's a basic paranormal gift. Is that something that only abductees have, or is that something that might be more extensively present in the population? We don't really know.
Believers argue that people who return with enhanced psychic abilities provide yet further proof that their experience was real.
People who've had this experience claim that they have unusual powers. But in actual fact, they don't seem able to demonstrate these powers under controlled conditions. If they could, then that would be absolutely amazing. But at the moment, the wider scientific community doesn't even accept that these kind of claimed powers are real.
Skeptics continue to dismiss the types of evidence ufologists and believers have to offer. But can they ignore the medical opinion of a qualified surgeon? especially one who claims that strange objects he has removed from abductees defy earthly explanation.
We have those which are metallic and covered with this very, very strange membrane. And at the time of surgery, it can't be cut with a surgical blade. It's impervious to cutting.
Rachel Devereaux had her first missing time experience just 3 months ago while driving home. Having looked into the phenomenon, she has decided to take a bold but common step for people who have had this type of encounter.
Hi.
She's going to have hypnotic regression.
I'm feeling quite nervous about it, about the regression, but also quite excited.
Right, so you might not have done this before, but I've done it a few thousand times.
Rachel's hoping that under hypnosis she can be taken back to when she had her experience and retrieve memories that are not consciously accessible.
I want it to be an honest account, you know, if I do remember.
How do you feel?
Happy.
Yeah. You so feel that, it's okay. It's okay to feel. Stay with it.
It's no walls, it's just black everywhere. It's like standing in the middle of space. There's big bright light here, right in front of me. That's high, and that's watching what the little ones are doing, the small ones going round and looking at us and talking to each other. They think the boys are funny. They think they're funny. I can hear laughing now, the children laughing, they're really giggling. I'm scared for the children. But the light's there and it's just telling me it's fine and we're not going to hurt them. They're your children. They're your children, yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Just feel yourself coming back more and more alert. Good, well done. How do you feel?
Wow. I can't believe how real that felt.
From my perspective, having completed thousands of regressions over the years, she didn't fabricate that. She didn't pretend to cry.
Just speechless. I'm just kind of speechless.
Do I believe everything that happened? I'm sort of 90% there, yeah, that it was real.
Testimonies obtained from abductees under hypnosis often provide compelling, detailed accounts of what happened during their missing time episode. They have given ufologists a mountain of anecdotal evidence to support their claims. But skeptics find these reports unreliable.
The alien abduction phenomenon, I think, is somewhat complicated by the whole debate about hypnosis. Let's be honest, scientists don't even agree on what hypnosis is.
People typically think that hypnotic regression is this kind of magic key for unlocking repressed or hidden memories. In actual fact, it's a great way of producing false memories. It's based on expectations, it's based on imagination, it's all woven together, and then they believe in this narrative.
In the hands of the wrong people, it can be disastrous, and in the hands of the right people, people who know what they're doing, who have adequate controls in place for false memories and things like that, hypnosis is an excellent tool for getting at the truth.
With such a major source of research ignored by skeptics, the need for unequivocal physical evidence is all the more important. In America, a surgeon has come forward with claims which may provide ufologists with the break they've been hoping for.
I started this as the ultimate skeptic. I was then embroiled in the phenomena and shown things that could not be satisfactorily explained by our own science.
Dr. Lear has been a practicing foot surgeon for the past 35 years. But in 1994, he began removing foreign bodies from patients who claimed they were alien implants.
I'm going to numb you up right now. Is that all right? Okay, that's fine. So we're going to numb the area up real good.
A lot of these people have things in their bodies which they've stepped on or they're exposed in a machine shop to a piece of metal.
I'll make a small incision right here, not a big one.
Others, unfortunately, have mental problems and would like to be an abductee.
Since he started in this area 8 years ago, Dr. Lear has conducted 11 operations and claims to have removed an assortment of mysterious objects.
Looks like it to me. It looks black. Yeah. There it is, here. So let's put a piece of white gauze I think this is it, so we're going to x-ray to make sure.
We have those which are metallic and covered with this very, very strange membrane. And at the time of surgery, it can't be cut with a surgical blade. It's impervious to cutting. And researching the pathology books, no such entity has ever been found in the human body.
A logic explanation would be that it's not human tissue, of course.
However, when we get into the metals, that's when we really get into the strange stuff. We had help from the National Institute for Discovery Science, and they sent the first set of specimens to Los Alamos National Labs and to New Mexico Tech. Now, these were blind studies. All the studies are blind, and I mean by that the laboratories are not told the origin of the specimens. And the best analogy that the scientists were able to make initially were these were very close to meteorites.
The scientific community has generally disregarded Dr. Lear's claims. They feel his studies are inconclusive and are not supervised closely enough to rule out any chance that his samples may have been tampered with.
Metallic object in this container is being sealed.
Dr. Lear stands by his claims and thinks it is the skeptics who are at fault.
I have never met a skeptic yet that didn't know everything about what I was doing and drawn all the conclusions, but has never looked at one shred of the physical evidence or the data.
The moment of truth has arrived for Eric. With the X-ray and ultrasound results returned to the consultant, Eric is about to discover if the lump behind his ear is natural or extraterrestrial.
Il faudra que ce corps médical puisse aussi expliquer comment une telle protubérance peut bouger de 12 mm en 6 mois.
The first thing I want to show you is the ultrasound report and the ultrasound scan. And as you can see here, there is the lesion that we're looking at, and it's just under the surface of the skin. And the appearances of those in keeping with a cyst and nothing else. And when we look at the plain X-ray, there certainly is nothing metallic or anything of a hard consistency in this lump. And this is again in keeping with the diagnosis of a benign cystic lesion. We call it a sebaceous cyst. It's a collection of material from a blocked sweat gland, and it arises when a sweat pore becomes obstructed and the normal sebaceous material is not able to escape and therefore collects under the skin surface and forms a cystic collection.
Would it be possible to have an explanation about how a cyst could move from one point to another one?
There is no easy solution or answer to that problem. All I can speculate is that there may have been an episode of inflammation, which is typical of these cysts. Well, thank you very much indeed.
Oui, l'organisme peut être parfaitement naturel. Or, nous ignorons tout de la technologie des extraterrestres. Donc, on ne peut pas définitivement repousser l'hypothèse que ce soit un implant extraterrestre.
Although Dr. Patel believes his findings are conclusive, Eric remains unconvinced by such an orthodox diagnosis. And his concerns are shared by implant specialist Dr. Lear.
The object is certainly rectangular. The color is not normal for the skin. He claims that it has moved. That certainly negates something being a sebaceous cyst. Sebaceous, the word sebaceous comes from the word sebum, which is a gland attached to a hair follicle. And that becomes inflamed and infected, and that's how you get a sebaceous cyst. They would not move from one hair follicle to another.
If we got one of these implants and it turns out that it's of alien technology or that it's made of materials that wouldn't be easy to find on Earth, then great, it's a fantastic scientific breakthrough.
When dealing with this phenomenon, skeptics argue that the evidence does not exist, whereas ufologists say the evidence is there, but science just doesn't know how to interpret it. It would seem that without a miraculous breakthrough, there is little chance of either side reaching a common understanding. However, there are a new set of theories developed by the world's leading physicists that believers point to as holding the key to explaining this mystery.
A lot of physicists think we're entering a new golden age of theoretical physics. In a way, we're beginning to be able to address questions such as why is the universe here at all?
Dr. Brian Cox is a particle physicist who is directly involved with multi-million-dollar experiments to find out if the universe could contain hidden dimensions that are still to be discovered.
In the last 10 years, theories have been developed where we need other dimensions to explain the way the universe looks to us. So not only 3 dimensions, up, down and across, and even a 4th one, time, but actually something like 10 or 11 dimensions. That means there's a whole swathe of the universe out there that we really know very little about. Extra dimensions. There could be a centimetre away from my head, an entire universe with, things could live there for all we know. Also, there can be wormholes, so these are tunnels in space-time. So you could pop into a wormhole at one end of the universe and instantaneously appear at another end of the universe. And those tunnels could even be between one time in the universe to another, so they could, in principle, allow time travel to happen. Now, we don't know whether those things exist or not, but the theory allows them to exist.
These theories do not provide any evidence to support the claims of abductees, but they do offer a framework that can explain the universe and our place within it. And perhaps that's exactly what the missing time phenomenon is all about, trying to find a belief system that makes sense of our world and universe.
I think your belief system plays a part in interpreting, as it were, what you think you've seen. If you see a figure at the foot of your bed, if you're religious, you might think you've seen an angel. If you believe in the paranormal, you might say you've seen a ghost. If you're a ufologist, you might say that's an alien.
We live in a culture where it's easier to believe in God. It's saner to believe in a God than it is to believe that there's life on other planets. We have multiple witness sightings of people seeing extraterrestrials and their occupants. That's a no-no. There's a stigma. But if you believe in God, that's okay. I find that very interesting.
Most scientists agree that the universe is both old enough and large enough for extraterrestrial life to exist. Whether we've made contact with it yet depends on who or what you believe.
Someone doesn't believe Maya's prediction.
I'm sorry. It's not my fault.
The 4400 Tuesday at 9. And next here on Sky One, we're caught up in a murder.
You said we would be safe in Philadelphia.
Well, I was wrong.
Harrison Ford stars in Witness.
Phyllis Buddingham. Inside the scientific world, Buddingham's expertise is known as spectroscopy.
Spectroscopy is a group of techniques. You can also quantify things in liquids and gases. And each molecule will react differently with the light in giving absorption bands, and the result is a unique spectrum. Much as DNA is unique to each human.
To investigators outside the scientific world, simply put, you give Buddingham dirt from Delphos, and she will tell you what's in it. So in 1999, Phillips sent samples to Buddingham's Frontier Analysis Laboratory in Chagrin Falls, Ohio, for study.
I really didn't know what to expect. I knew there was some organic substance there. I didn't know what I was going to find. I'll never forget when I first got them. I put some in a test tube.
Astonished by her first observation, Buddingham is also surprised that the soil is still hydrophobic.
To show you that the Delphos ring soil is still hydrophobic after all these years. I'm going to add these approximately the same amount of water extract on the top is a much darker color than that of the control sample. So clearly something has been extracted.
On subsequent trips to the Delphos site over a period of 10 years, Phillips noted that the ring on the ground remained visible and that no new plant life was able to grow. Although researchers cannot explain why they believe the craft made the soil hydrophobic, Buttinger offers a scientific reason for how.
There was organic material coated on the surface of the soil that made it hydrophobic. And this organic material was identified by myself as fulvic acid.
Fulvic acid is a naturally occurring substance found in the ground during plant decomposition. It can cause soil rejuvenation and can be an excellent supplement to fertilizer. Although fulvic acid is found naturally in soil, Buttinger believes the amount of it in the Delphos ring is anything but natural.
Fulvic acid would not be in the concentrations that is naturally occurring. It was added. It's part of a release of something. There is no natural explanation for these high levels of fulvic acid in the soil. I really don't know where it came from.
This unexplained release of fulvic acid is not the only abnormality that Buttinger discovered in the Delphos soil sample. High levels of oxalic acid, which is a known skin and eye irritant, were also found to be present in the soil. Oxalic acid could account for the numbing effects on Mrs. Johnson's fingers and leg that lasted for the remainder of her life. But for scientists, this compound, coupled with the fulvic acid, makes way for some interesting speculation on the glowing effects of the soil.
I think that the substance came when it was being released from the craft, is that the craft's propulsion system created an ionic field which excited the material. And I think when it fell, it was luminescing from the interaction with the ionic field of the craft. And I think it's a clue to the propulsion system of this machine.
Buttinger's theory and analysis have motivated investigators and researchers to come up with some type of scientific explanation. Years after the Delphos incident, another trace evidence case causes widespread panic in Missouri.
All the people are screaming, and it's hovering there 10 feet above the ground.
They are the clues left behind. From a quadrangle formation of landing legs in Socorro, New Mexico, to a mysterious glowing ring in Delphos, Kansas. Since 1964, there have been thousands of cases of UFO trace evidence. To field investigator Ted Phillips, these common trace characteristics he has discovered support the reality of UFOs.
And in the hundreds of cases I've personally investigated, my conclusion is that we're dealing with a device, a machine of mass, constructed by an intelligence and under the control of something intelligent. And that's obvious by the things that they do, the way they maneuver into a landing site, out of it, a number of things.
September 1st, 1974. Langenberg, Saskatchewan, Canada. For farmer Edwin Furr, a routine chore turns into one of the most frightening experiences of his life.
Furr observed this object near the ground. He stopped and went over very close to it. And he could see it was metallic looking, it was flat on the bottom, it was domed on top, it was hovering just a foot or so over the ground.
And he's 15 feet in daylight away from an object. No sound. It's spinning, rotating at a very high rate. In the surface of this thing, he said, had a very old and used up appearance. And in it he could see dark sort of grooves. At the base he could see a sort of wide belt that went around the lower section.
Shocked at what he encounters, Fur slowly retreats back to his tractor, hoping to escape from the object. As he climbs back on, his shock turns to terror when he realizes there is more than just one UFO.
And he could see there were 4 more. And they were sort of equidistant from each other in a semicircle around the high grass. All same type of objects, same configuration, same color, all rotating.
The ground or the crop underneath the object was spun in a spiral. And the plants were rotated and knocked down underneath each one of these.
After hovering in the field for a few minutes, the objects begin their ascent.
The objects ascended silently, vertically, in a step formation. Object 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And as they ascended vertically, silently, he could see beneath each object 2 vent-like extensions, out of which there came a 6-foot-long plume of gray material.
The objects disappear. After Fur's encounter, Constable Ronald Morier of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police receives word of the event and visits the Fur property. The physical trace evidence that he discovers puzzles the investigators.
Here were 5 rings, all swirled, compressed in the same direction, all counterclockwise. And the central area in each of the rings was unaffected. The grass was standing up normally. And their sizes ranged from 8 foot in diameter to 11 feet in diameter. And Morier's conclusion, after a full and extensive investigation, impressed me considerably. He said, this really happened, and whatever made these rings came out of the air and left the same way. And that pretty well says it.
More than 3 decades have passed since the event, and multiple field investigations have not produced a single logical explanation. Throughout the 1970s alone, Phillips catalogs more than 400 events similar to the Langenberg case. October 8th, 1978. Cato, Missouri. A grandmother and her grandchild witness a mysterious object in the field that catches their attention.
She could see an oval white something sitting in the field. And I found later that this was about 185 feet from the house. And so she called her husband. He called his son. And it wasn't doing anything, it was just sitting there.
The neat part is they came up with the explanation that it must be a piece of metal that blew in there in a storm. So they didn't say it's a UFO out there. They said, you know, if something's in our field and it shouldn't be there, we got to get it out.
When the father starts his tractor to move the object, something strange occurs.
The object leaps about 10 feet straight up into the air. Reaction. Control. And this thing is only like 4 feet in diameter. And all the people are screaming. And it's hovering there 10 feet above the ground.
The object then begins an ascent away from the property.
Not fast, just kind of cruising. No sound at any time, and the object is rotating. No wings, no engine, no visible means of support. It continues its climb. It makes a definite right turn, which I find later is across the wind. Flies to the right slightly for a few feet. Makes a very strong left turn across the wind, another right turn, and continues to climb.
As the object increases elevation, the witnesses report that it merges with a second, much larger cylindrical-shaped UFO in the sky.
And the cylinder flies away at a pretty good rate of speed. And so the farmer and his son walked to the spot where the object had been, and they arrived there to find a 4-foot area of dehydrated plants. And the whole site already is turned a very dead, wilted brown.
The physical characteristics left behind by the UFO in Cato makes it a classic trace case. This photograph, taken only a few minutes after the event, proves to Phillips that something unexplained took place on the farm in Cato, and he wants to find out what it was.
The site basically is oval. The grass immediately surrounding it is lush green, perfectly healthy. Not another spot in the entire field that looks like this area. And at the outside edge of the site, near these two little impacted craters, bull nettle plants, which are large-leafed, very tough plants. The leaves were not burned, but they were drawn up tightly as though some kind of heat generated and they closed up.
To Phillips, this discovery could be evidence of the craft's propulsion disturbing the Earth. But there's an additional scientific anomaly that investigators have yet to explain.
Craters were about 1.25 inches deep in some very hard soil. So I don't know if this occurred on landing or if it occurred on ascent. But no sound was ever heard at any time indicating any kind of propulsion system. And yet it had to exist for this 4-foot object to cross the wind 3 times.
In the course of Phillips's investigations, trace cases like the Cato event consist mostly of physical effects left behind on the ground. But in 1979, a mysterious object not only leaves trace evidence, it nearly kills a Minnesota deputy sheriff.
I believe that something extraterrestrial really did happen here. Nobody's ever been able to prove that it was something different.
Now, investigators look over the actual patrol car and find new evidence.
So this actually has flexed in and back out, as though there was sort of a suction?
Something like that.
Pulled it out.
Yep.
I mean, that's incredible.
August 27th, 1979, Warren, Minnesota. It was a routine patrol for Deputy Val Johnson. But at 2:19 a.m., his life would suddenly change.
He sees a light off in the distance on an adjacent road, blacktop highway, 2-laner, and figures that it may be a small aircraft with a landing light coming in to make an emergency landing. So he turns down that road to see if he can render assistance.
Almost instantaneously, that light went right from like 1.5 miles away to right in his face. And he ended up crashing the car.
After the crash, police dispatch receives a call for help.
407, what's the problem? I don't know. Someone just hit my car. I don't know how to explain it. Strange.
One of the law enforcement officers who saw the damage firsthand was Marshall County Sheriff Herb Morstead. Sheriff Morstead, a deputy at the time, vividly recalls the night of the encounter with the actual car from the event.
And Al Johnson was still in the car. He was dazed and seemed kind of confused, didn't know for sure what had happened to him. And there was considerable damage to the car that was documented at that time.
He was driving a Ford LTD, and you don't damage an LTD with some little trivial thing. There was quite an impact.
The physical damage to the car baffles the investigators on the scene.
To look down, first damage was done to the headlight of the car. It's busted. It's in the original condition it was from that night. The interesting thing is you can see by looking at the headlight, there's no deer hair or debris or anything in there that would explain how the damage was done. And then as you move up on the car onto the hood, there's a round dent in the hood. And further up on the windshield is busted and cracked quite severely. Again, there's no evidence of any rocks or debris or anything that would have broke this windshield. further on in the car, up on the roof, there's one of the lenses from the warning lights is busted. And behind that are the two antennas that were damaged. The interesting part on these antennas was right where the antenna bends, there were bugs attached to that antenna, which would indicate that nobody could have physically or used a tool to bend that antenna because they would have had to disturb those bugs.
The effects of Deputy Johnson's alleged UFO encounter go beyond the damage to his police cruiser.
Later on, the investigation continued. Val Johnson was found to have had what they call welder's burn to his eyes, supposedly from the light that he had encountered. One of the other things that was curious is the watch on his wrist and the car clock both stopped for 14 minutes.
That's kind of an interesting piece of evidence. For what most people don't know, though, a lot of cops will synchronize their watches with dispatch, the car clock, and then their private timepiece, so that all three were operating at the same time, so that in the course of your night you made notations in reference to a case that it would be as accurate as possible.
I wish I knew what happened during the 14 minutes that these two timepieces were affected. But there is, again, a lot of room for speculation, scientific speculation, of what happens when a person's involved in something like this.
Deputy Johnson's squad car has been put on display at the Marshall County Historical Society Museum. Phillips has traveled more than 1,000 miles exclusively for this History Channel program in order to see the damage firsthand. Phillips arrives in Warren, Minnesota, and receives a personal guided tour of the squad car by Sheriff Morstead.
I've looked at photos of this so many times, it's like I've actually seen it. And that's incredible.
Phillips is then startled by a new piece of evidence given by the sheriff.
The windshield has probably got the most damage. It's damage that was caused by a force pushing that windshield in and then back out again.
Really?
Yeah.
So this actually has flexed in and back out? As though there was sort of a suction?
Something like that.
Pulled it out?
Yep.
I mean, that's incredible.
For more than 3 hours, Phillips and Sheriff Morstead survey the car and discuss the case. Phillips also learns that current law enforcement officers have no doubt about Johnson's story.
Well, I believe Officer Johnson, when he was working as a deputy, I believe he was honest that night. He told the facts.
Val Johnson was a good, honest man, a good deputy sheriff, and I have no reason not to believe him.
When an officer comes forward with a story of an encounter, he or she risks everything. Their career, their personal life, maybe their marriage, their family. They're putting it all on the line.
Phillips has now reopened his investigation into the Minnesota encounter in hopes of finding out what really happened in the early morning hours of August 27th, 1979. Many researchers believe that this trace case, along with thousands of others, will eventually lead us to the truth about UFOs.
I think landing trace cases, physical trace cases, are a very important aspect of the whole picture, especially when people say there is no evidence. Well, fingerprint is evidence, isn't it?
So often you hear people say, well, I don't believe in UFOs, or I'll believe it when I see it. Well, the significance of that is they can just look at a trace evidence case and they can say they've seen it.
It gives us evidence that, along with the witnesses' observation, that there is something out there.
I think what we're finding at landing sites certainly confirms the reality of what are called UFOs. And it confirms it because it is proof positive that something very unusual took place, and what remains there is inexplicable.
And it's probably the biggest story of mankind if we come out and show people the evidence.